After my shift, I got into the elevator to leave the office and pressed the button for the first floor. But when the doors slid open, it wasn't our lobby waiting for me. For the next 2 hours, I was trapped in an elevator maze where every floor led to a different reality. I should have left work at a normal hour, but the Morrison account deadline was the next morning, and the presentation needed to be perfect. By the time I finished, the digital clock on my desk read 11:37 p.m. The office floor was empty, the overhead lights dimmed to their nighttime setting. Only the cleaning staff remained, quietly working their way through the building. I gathered my things, nodded to the custodian vacuuming the hallway, and pressed the call button for the elevator. Our building was 42 stories of gleaming steel and glass, and my marketing firm occupied the 28th floor. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. The descent began normally. I checked my phone, answering a few late emails as the floor numbers ticked downward on the digital display. 28, 27, 26. I paid little attention until the elevator slowed and the doors opened with that same pleasant chime. I looked up, expecting to see the familiar marble-floored lobby with its security desk and revolving doors. Instead, I found myself staring at what appeared to be a hotel corridor, long and carpeted, with numbered doors stretching into the distance. I blinked, confused. Had I pressed the wrong button? I glanced at the elevator panel. The number 1 was clearly illuminated. "Excuse me," I called out to a passing housekeeper. "Is this the lobby?" She gave me an odd look. "This is the 14th floor." "But," I gestured at the elevator display, which still showed 1. The housekeeper shrugged and continued pushing her cart down the hallway. I pressed the door close button, then hit 1 again. The elevator descended once more. When it stopped and the doors opened, I was looking at an empty subway platform. The air was cooler here, with a distinct underground smell of concrete and electricity. A distant rumble suggested a train approaching. My confusion deepened. I stepped out cautiously, looking around. The platform was deserted, the station signs unfamiliar. I didn't even recognize the subway line colors. I turned back quickly and re-entered the elevator before the doors could close. My heart rate had accelerated. Something was very wrong. I pressed 28, hoping to return to my office. At least there I knew where I was. The elevator ascended. When the doors opened, I found myself looking at what appeared to be a hospital corridor. Medical equipment lined the walls. A nurse's station stood directly ahead, though no staff were visible. This wasn't my office. It wasn't even my building anymore. I remained in the elevator, increasingly alarmed. I pressed the emergency call button. No response. I tried my cell phone. No signal. I pressed the lobby button again, then the button for my floor, then every button on the panel in succession. The elevator responded, moving up or down as directed, but each floor opened onto something completely different. A shopping mall after hours, a dimly lit restaurant kitchen, an empty classroom, a warehouse filled with shipping containers. None of them were places that should exist in my office building. None of them had people who could help me. After exploring a few floors, only to find the elevator was the sole exit, I realized I was trapped in some kind of impossible spatial loop. The elevator was real and consistent, but it was connecting to places that couldn't possibly exist in the same structure. On what should have been the 33rd floor, the doors opened onto a vast library. Unlike the other floors, this one wasn't deserted. An elderly librarian sat at a central desk, sorting through index cards. She looked up as the elevator chimed. "Hello there," she said, showing no surprise at my arrival. "You seem lost." "I am," I admitted, finally stepping out. "I'm trying to get to the lobby of Remington Tower, but the elevator keeps taking me to the wrong places." She nodded as if this was a common complaint. "The elevators can be tricky after hours. They don't always go where you expect." "But this is impossible," I said. "I've been to at least 10 different buildings." "Not different buildings," she corrected. "Different versions of this building. The elevator travels between potential realities." I stared at her. That can't be right." She shrugged and returned to her index cards. "Believe what you like, but if you want to get back to your specific reality, you'll need to find the right combination." "Combination?" "Of floors. The elevator needs to be told the correct sequence. Think of it like a combination lock, 3 specific floors visited in the correct order." "How am I supposed to know which floors?" She looked up again. "What floor do you work on?" 28. "And what floor were you trying to reach?" 1. The lobby." She nodded. "So you need a 3-digit combination that connects 28 to 1. I'd suggest you start trying." "There are thousands of possible combinations." "Yes," she agreed, "but the sequence usually has personal significance, something meaningful to the traveler." Before I could ask more questions, the lights in the library flickered. The librarian frowned. "You should go now. It's getting late and some of the night floors aren't as friendly." As if to emphasize her point, a low rumbling sound came from somewhere deep in the library stacks. Something heavy was moving between the shelves. I retreated to the elevator and pressed the close door button repeatedly. As the doors slid shut, I caught a glimpse of something large and shadowy emerging from between the rows of books. The elevator felt like my only safe haven now. I tried to think. A meaningful 3-digit sequence between 28 and 1. What could that be? I decided to try my birthday. The 16th of April. I pressed 16, then 4. The elevator moved, stopping at the 16th floor. The doors opened onto a forest. Not a park or garden, but an actual dense forest with towering trees and underbrush. A narrow path led away from the elevator, which appeared to be standing incongruously among the trees. I could hear birds calling and the rustle of small animals. I let the doors close without stepping out and pressed 4. When those doors opened, I was looking at a beach. Waves lapped at the shore just 20 feet from the elevator doors. The air was heavy with salt and moisture. I pressed 28 again, hoping to complete the sequence and return to my starting point. The elevator moved upward. When the doors opened, my spirits soared momentarily. It was an office floor, with cubicles and conference rooms visible. But as I stepped out, I realized it wasn't my office. The layout was similar, but the details were wrong. The company logo on the wall said Remington Solutions rather than Remington Partners. Same building, different reality. I returned to the elevator frustrated. My birthday hadn't worked. I tried other combinations with personal significance. My apartment number, my parents' anniversary, my college graduation year. Each took me to different places, some mundane, some impossible, none of them my reality. After what felt like hours of attempts, I slumped against the elevator wall, exhausted. What was I missing? Then it hit me. The librarian had said the combination connects my starting point to my destination. Maybe it wasn't about my personal significance, but about the building itself. I remembered something from my first day at work. The building was inaugurated in 1973, and the company moved in on the 15th of May. I pressed 19, then 7, then 3. The elevator moved smoothly. When the doors opened, I was looking at the familiar marble-floored lobby. The security guard glanced up from his desk, surprised to see someone arriving so late. "Working late, Mr. Harris?" he asked. Relief flooded through me. "Yes, just finishing up the Morrison account." I stepped out quickly before the elevator could trap me again. As I crossed the lobby toward the exit, I heard the elevator chime behind me. I turned to look. Inside stood a figure in a custodian's uniform, the same custodian I'd nodded to earlier. But now I could see his face clearly in the lobby's bright lights. His features were subtly wrong, his smile too wide, his eyes reflecting the light in a way that human eyes shouldn't. He held up a hand in farewell as the doors closed, taking him back into the labyrinth of floors. After the explosion in the mine, 6 of us were trapped nearly 2 kilometers underground in a collapsed tunnel. The rescue team wouldn't reach us for at least 72 hours, but in the morning of the 3rd day, the sounds that came from the darkness proved we weren't alone down there. The explosion rocked the entire shaft. One moment we were working the seam, the next we were thrown to the ground as the tunnel behind us collapsed in a deafening roar of stone and metal. Dust filled the air, choking us as we scrambled for our emergency respirators. When the dust settled, the 6 of us gathered in the small chamber that had become our prison. Jim, our shift supervisor, did a head count. "Everyone here? Martinez, Smith, Dawson, Roberts, Kowalski?" We all responded, shaken but alive. No serious injuries, just cuts and bruises. Jim activated the emergency beacon, but we already knew the situation. The blast had sealed off our exit, and we were now trapped 2,000 meters below the surface in the oldest section of the mine. "Control room confirms they received our signal," Jim said, checking the communicator. "They're organizing a rescue team, but with the tunnel collapse." He didn't need to finish. We all understood the reality of our situation. Digging through to reach us would take time, 3 days at minimum, maybe longer. We took stock of our supplies. Each of us carried emergency rations and water in our gear. The chamber had an emergency air supply that would last about 4 days if we were conservative. We had portable lights with batteries for about 72 hours. The first day passed slowly. We established a small camp in the chamber, setting up our emergency lights to conserve battery power. We rationed our food and water. Martinez, our resident joker, tried to keep spirits high with bad mining jokes that we'd all heard 100 times before. We slept in shifts, 2 awake at all times to monitor the air quality and listen for any communication from the rescue team. The communicator crackled occasionally with updates. They were making progress, but slowly. By the 2nd day, the reality of our situation had fully set in. The chamber, about 15 meters long and 8 meters wide, felt smaller by the hour. The darkness beyond our light perimeter seemed to press in on us. Smith was the first to mention the sounds. "Does anyone else hear that?" he asked during his watch, around what we guessed was midnight on the 2nd day. "Hear what?" I asked, sitting up from my makeshift bed. "Like scratching, coming from the north tunnel." The north tunnel was one of 3 that connected to our chamber. It was an older section, largely untouched by our recent operations. According to the mine maps, it dead-ended about 100 meters in. Jim shone his light down the tunnel entrance. The beam penetrated only about 20 meters before the darkness swallowed it. "Probably just settling rock," he said. "These old tunnels shift all the time." Smith nodded, but didn't seem convinced. By the morning of the 3rd day, we were all on edge. The air recycler was working, but the chamber felt stuffy and too warm. The latest communication from the surface was not encouraging. They'd hit a pocket of unstable rock and had to proceed more carefully than anticipated. It was during a moment of silence, as we all sat eating our morning ration, that we heard it. A distinct tapping sound, like metal on stone, coming from the north tunnel. Not random or natural, this had a pattern. 3 quick taps, pause, 3 more. We all froze, looking at each other. "That's a mining signal," Dawson said unnecessarily. We all recognized it. Jim grabbed his light and moved toward the tunnel entrance. "Could be the rescue team approaching from another angle." "Not possible." Roberts, our engineering specialist, shook his head. "That tunnel's been sealed off for decades. It doesn't connect to any active part of the mine." Jim keyed the communicator. "Control, this is Shift Leader Harmon. Are there any rescue teams approaching from the north tunnel of Section 12? The response came back almost immediately. "Negative, Shift Leader. All rescue operations are concentrated at the main collapse site. No teams in any other areas." The tapping came again. 3 quick taps. Pause. 3 more. Jim hesitated, then picked up a wrench and tapped the tunnel wall 3 times. Pause. 3 times. Silence followed, stretching for almost a minute. Then, 5 rapid taps. "That's not a standard signal," Kowalski whispered. While waiting for a response from Control, we heard movement in the tunnel, a shuffling sound like something being dragged across the stone floor. "Hello?" Jim called out, his voice echoing down the dark passage. "Is someone there?" No response, just more shuffling, closer now. The communicator crackled. "Shift Leader, this is Historical Archives. We're checking old signal codes now. Can you describe the pattern again?" As Jim explained, a new sound emerged from the tunnel, a low, whistling breath. The response from the surface was not reassuring. "Shift Leader, we have no record of that pattern in any official mine documentation." Before Jim could answer, something moved at the edge of our light's reach. A shape, low to the ground, retreating as soon as the light found it. "Did you see that?" Martinez hissed, grabbing my arm. I nodded, unable to speak. It had moved like a person, but not quite right. Too fluid, too close to the ground. "Jim!" Roberts called, his voice tight with controlled fear. "Look at this!" He was pointing to the ground near the tunnel entrance. In the dust and dirt was a handprint, but not a normal handprint. The fingers were too long, the thumb positioned at an impossible angle. "That's not human," Kowalski whispered. The tapping started again, more insistent now. No pattern, just continuous, growing louder, coming from multiple points within the tunnel. "Control," Jim's voice was steady despite everything. "Be advised, we may have a situation involving local wildlife. Request immediate information on any known animal species in the deep mine environment." The response was immediate. "Shift Leader, there are no known animal species that could survive at your depth." The tapping stopped abruptly. Then came a sound that turned my blood to ice, a voice, distant and distorted, calling from the darkness.
"Help us."
"That's not possible," Roberts whispered. "No one could be down here."
"Help us."
The voice came again, closer this time. It sounded human, but with a strange, hollow quality. "Jim," I said, finding my voice at last, "we need to block that tunnel." He nodded grimly. "Kowalski, Roberts, help me move these supply crates. We'll barricade the entrance." As we worked, the voice continued to call, now joined by others. A chorus of hollow voices pleading for help. With each call, they sounded closer. Just as we finished our makeshift barricade, something hit it from the other side. The crates shifted slightly, but held. "Control," Jim spoke into the communicator. "We are experiencing unusual phenomena. Request any historical information about incidents in the north section." Finally, the communicator crackled. "Shift leader, be advised that the north section was sealed in 1976 following an incident. Details are restricted, but we're trying to access the full records now." "What kind of incident?" Jim demanded. A new voice came over the communicator, older, authoritative. "This is Mine Director Peterson. Who am I speaking with?" "Shift Leader James Harmon, sir. We're experiencing a situation with unknown entities approaching from the North Tunnel." "Listen carefully, Harmon." The director's voice was tense. "The North section was sealed for a reason. In 1976, a team of miners broke through to a natural cavern system. What they found there, it wasn't documented officially. The miners who survived described creatures adapted to life in complete darkness, human-like, but changed by generations underground. The barricade shook violently as multiple impacts hit it simultaneously. "Sir, we've barricaded the tunnel, but I don't know how long it will hold," Jim reported. "The records call them deep dwellers. They're sensitive to light and sound. Use your brightest lights, make noise. They hunt by sound, but too much overwhelms them." We aimed all our lights at the barricade. Behind the crates, something screeched, a high, painful sound. Martinez grabbed 2 metal pipes and began banging them together. The screeching intensified, then began to fade as the creatures retreated. "Control, how long until the rescue team reaches us?" 18 hours minimum, came the response. Jim looked at our lights, then at the power indicators. "Our batteries won't last that long at full brightness." We established a rotation, 2 lights at full power on the barricade at all times. We took turns making noise. Every time we quieted, we could hear them return, testing the barricade. By the early morning of the 4th day, we were exhausted. 2 of our 6 lights had died completely. The barricade shifted with each impact. Suddenly, a section collapsed. A pale, elongated hand reached through the gap, fingers stretching impossibly. Robert screamed, bringing a pipe down on the hand. It withdrew with an inhuman shriek, but the damage was done. "Fall back," Jim ordered. We retreated to the far side of the chamber, forming a semicircle with our remaining lights. Beyond that perimeter, shapes moved in the darkness. Pale, emaciated forms that seemed to flow rather than walk. 4 hours to rescue, Control updated. "We hear you're drilling. Hang on." We could hear it too, the distant sound of a rescue drill boring through rock. But our lights were failing. One by one, they dimmed and died. In our final hour, with just one flickering light between us and the creatures, we heard the drill break through. Light flooded the chamber as the rescue team emerged, bringing industrial floodlights. The creatures retreated instantly, vanishing into the north tunnel. Later, they told us what they found when they sent an exploration team. The tunnel opened into a vast natural cavern system. They found evidence of habitation, crude tools, marks on walls. But of the creatures themselves, there was no sign. When the car broke down in the middle of the road, the fuel gauge was already on empty, and the nearest gas station was 50 kilometers away. The fog around me thickened all at once, and the town that appeared ahead wasn't on any map. It was a ghost. The moment I stepped inside, I realized the fog wasn't just the weather, it was the town itself. I cursed as my car sputtered to a final stop. The fuel gauge had been flashing empty for the last 20 miles, but I'd hoped to reach the next town before running out completely. According to my map, I was still a good 30 miles from anywhere with a gas station. It was late afternoon, and fog had been rolling in steadily for the past hour, growing thicker by the minute. Now it surrounded my car in a ghostly embrace, limiting visibility to maybe 20 feet in any direction. The two-lane highway stretched ahead and behind, disappearing into white nothingness. I tried my cell phone, no signal. With no other option, I grabbed my jacket and stepped out of the car. The air was unusually cold and damp, clinging to my skin like wet silk. The fog muffled all sound, creating an eerie silence broken only by occasional drips of moisture from nearby trees. I decided to walk ahead, hoping to find help. I'd gone maybe a quarter mile when the fog shifted, parting like a curtain to reveal something unexpected, the outskirts of a small town. I stopped, confused. There hadn't been any sign indicating a town, and nothing showed on my map. Yet there it was, old-fashioned buildings lining a main street, their forms hazy through the mist. A wooden sign stood at the town's entrance, "Welcome to Stillwater, where time stands still." The town had a distinctly old-fashioned feel. No chain stores or modern signage, just local businesses with painted wooden signs. A hardware store, a diner, a small grocery, a bookshop. The architecture seemed to span different eras. Victorian buildings alongside 1950s storefronts, and even some colonial-style structures. As if the town had been built piecemeal across centuries, without anything ever being torn down or updated. Despite the early evening hour, the streets were nearly empty. I spotted a few people hurrying along the sidewalks, collars turned up against the fog. They glanced at me as they passed, their expressions unreadable. I approached the diner, its windows glowing invitingly. A bell jingled as I pushed open the door, and conversation inside briefly paused as several patrons turned to look at me. Then, as if by some unspoken signal, they returned to their meals and conversations. I took a seat at the counter. A waitress approached, middle-aged, with hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that seemed too pale, almost colorless. "You're not from around here," she said. It wasn't a question. "No, my car broke down on the highway, out of gas. Is there a service station in town?" She nodded slowly. "Miller's Garage, end of Main Street, but Tom Miller won't be open until morning. Is there a hotel or somewhere I can stay the night?" "Stillwater Inn, 2 blocks down." She placed a menu in front of me. "You should eat something first. Fog like this can seep into your bones if you don't stay warm." I ordered coffee and stew, which warmed me from the inside out. As I ate, I studied the diner more carefully. Everything looked as if it had been installed in the 50s and never updated. "Excuse me," I asked the waitress when she refilled my coffee, "how far is Stillwater from Oak Ridge?" She frowned slightly. "Oak Ridge? Never heard of it." "It's the next major town on Highway 43, about 30 miles east of here." "Highway 43 doesn't go near here," she said with certainty. "You must be thinking of somewhere else." I pulled out my map and spread it on the counter. "Look, here's where I was driving." I traced the road with my finger, then searched for Stillwater. It wasn't there. The waitress glanced at the map disinterestedly. "Maps change. Towns come and go." "Towns don't just disappear from maps," I said. She gave me a long look, her pale eyes reflecting the diner's light strangely. "Don't they?" Before I could respond, the diner's door opened and a tall man in a sheriff's uniform entered. The fog seemed to swirl around him before the door closed, as if reluctant to let him go. "Evening, Martha," he said to the waitress, then turned to me. "You must be the owner of the sedan parked out on Highway 43. I nodded. "Ran out of gas. I was planning to stay at the inn and get help in the morning." "Good plan," he said, studying me with the same pale eyes as the waitress. "I'm Sheriff Thomas. I'll give you a ride to the inn when you're finished here." When I finished my meal, Sheriff Thomas drove me to the Stillwater Inn in his patrol car, an old model that, like everything else in this town, seemed from another era. The fog had grown even thicker, clinging to the buildings and street lamps like ghostly shrouds. The inn was a 3-story Victorian structure with gingerbread trim. Inside, a small, hunched man with wispy white hair checked me in without asking for ID or credit card. Just my name, which he wrote in an actual ledger with a fountain pen. "Room 7, top of the stairs, end of the hall," he said, handing me an actual metal key. "Breakfast at 7. Mind the fog. It gets thicker at night." My room was clean but dated, with floral wallpaper and a 4-poster bed. Through the window, I could see only swirling white mist, occasionally broken by the dim glow of a street lamp. I tried the television, an old tube model, but it showed only static. My phone still had no signal. Exhausted, I decided to get some sleep and figure things out in the morning. I dreamt of fog, endless swirling fog that whispered with countless voices. In the dream, I walked through Stillwater's streets, but they stretched and twisted impossibly. People watched from windows, their faces blurring and shifting like the fog itself. I woke with the start at 3:17 a.m. The fog outside my window seemed to have thickened, pressing against the glass like a living thing. Tendrils of mist appeared to be seeping through the window frame, despite it being closed. Unable to fall back asleep, I decided to review my map again. When I unfolded it under the bedside lamp, I froze. There, where nothing had been before, was a small dot labeled Stillwater. I was certain it hadn't been there when I checked the map in the diner. Morning came with no improvement in the fog. After breakfast, I set out to find Miller's garage. The town felt different in daylight, though the fog obscured the sun to a pale white disk overhead. More people were on the streets, all moving with the same unhurried pace, as if time held less meaning here. At the garage, Tom Miller, a barrel-chested man with grease-stained hands and those same pale eyes, told me, "Out of gas, huh? I can help with that. But the fog's too thick for driving today. You'd be better off waiting until it clears." "When will that be?" I asked. He shrugged. "Hard to say. Fog has its own schedule around here." I spent the day exploring the town. The buildings contained an impossible mix of eras. Rotary phones alongside flat-screen TVs, horse-drawn carriages parked next to modern cars. In the local library, I searched for information about Stillwater. The town records were sparse and contradictory. Different founding dates, events that couldn't possibly have occurred. The librarian, an elegant elderly woman, watched me with amusement. When I approached her with my confusion, she smiled. "Stillwater isn't like other places," she said softly. "The fog, it preserves things, time, people, memories, things that have been forgotten elsewhere." "I don't understand," I said. "Have you noticed that you can't quite remember how you got here? The exact road you took, the towns you passed through before your car stopped?" I tried to recall, but my memories seemed hazy, obscured like the landscape around the town. "The fog finds people who are untethered," she continued. "People who have become disconnected from their own lives. It brings them here." "That's impossible," I said. "Is it? Look at your driver's license." I pulled out my wallet and froze. My license photo showed my face, but the name was unfamiliar. The address listed a city I'd never lived in. "This isn't mine," I said, panic rising. "Isn't it?" she asked gently. "Or is it just not who you remember being?" I fled the library, running until I reached my car. I tried repeatedly to leave, but each attempt brought me back to Stillwater from a different direction. The fog was reshaping space itself. That evening, Sheriff Thomas told me, "The fog chose you, just like it chose all of us. We were all travelers once, passing through. Is there no way out? Some have left. Those who finally remember who they were before. Those who find what they lost." In the following days, I began to notice changes. My reflection seemed different each time, sometimes younger, sometimes older. Memories surfaced that I couldn't place. A house I didn't recognize, people I didn't know yet somehow felt familiar. Then one morning, I woke knowing something had changed. The fog had thinned slightly. When I went downstairs, the innkeeper looked at me differently. "You're starting to remember," he said. And I was. Fragments of a car accident I'd never recalled, a grief I'd buried so deeply that I'd forgotten its cause, a life I'd been running from when the fog found me. That afternoon, I returned to my car with the gas can from Miller. As I poured the fuel, I noticed a photograph on the passenger seat. Myself with a woman and a young girl. Their faces triggered a flood of memories, painful but real. When I drove away, the fog began to thin, revealing the highway ahead. In my rearview mirror, Stillwater faded into white mist. I drove for hours, the memories continuing to return. By the time I reached the next town, I remembered everything. The accident, the family I'd abandoned in my guilt, the aimless wandering. I called home for the first time in over a year. When my wife answered, her voice broke. "Where have you been?" she asked through tears. I looked out at the clear night sky, not a trace of fog in sight. "Lost," I said. "But I think I found my way back."